Welcome back to Life's Shalom. My name is Avital, and this week's Parsha is Parshat Kedoshim. And Parshat Kedoshim is a really uniquely beautiful Parsha because the majority of the Parsha focuses on laws and commands between person and person, between man and man. Whereas so many of the commandments are about our relationship between ourselves and God, Parshat Kedoshim really emphasizes the relationship between one person and another person. And that is already just such a beautiful idea and a beautiful message because it shows us the value and the importance not only of our relationship with God, but that our relationships with other people matter so much as well. So much that they merit to have their own commandments. Now, 2 years ago when I talked about Parshat Kedoshim, I focused on the very famous command that the Torah tells us in this Parsha that says, "You shall love your neighbor as yourself." And how the verses in Parshat Kedoshim are teaching us exactly how to show love to another person. And I'll give you a couple of examples. Some of the commandments that we get in the Parsha, one is, you shall not lie. You shall not oppress your fellow. You shall not rob. You shall not stand by while your fellow's blood is being shed. And those are just a couple of the examples, but there's an abundance of them in this week's Parsha. And each one of those things is teaching us exactly how it is to give love to other people. If you aren't lying to them, if you're not robbing from them, if you're not oppressing them, if you're being there in their time of need, then you are showing them love and you are giving them that love of loving your neighbor like yourself. But what I wanted to talk about this week, about Parshat Kedoshim, is when I was reading these verses that are showing us how to love our brethren, I was wondering if the inverse of you shall love your neighbor as yourself is also true, which would be, should we love ourselves the way we love our neighbors? And the obvious answer might seem like, yes, definitely we should love ourselves the way we love our neighbors. But for some people, and I'd argue for many people, it's much easier to give love to other people, give this outpouring of love. We're kind people. We want to share that with other people, than it is to make sure that we're receiving that same kind of love and that we're having that same kind of love for ourselves. So if the Torah is telling us to love our neighbors as ourselves, and then it lists all of these statutes and all these commands as like the ways to show love to them, it's only obvious that we have to show love to ourselves in those ways that the Torah is listing. So let me give you a little bit of an example because I know it sounds very abstract at the moment. So let's take you shall not lie, right? If a way of showing love to our neighbors is not to lie to them, then a way to show love to ourselves is not to allow ourselves to be lied to, so not to surround ourselves with people who are being dishonest to us, and also not to lie to ourselves, not to dilute ourselves into believing things that just aren't true. That only causes us pain and only causes us suffering and confusion. So not only should we not let others lie to us and not surround ourselves with these dishonest people, but we need to be truthful with ourselves even when it's difficult. Taking those other ones, you shall not stand by while your fellow's blood is being shed. If we are in a difficult time and we need support, and those who are important to us aren't being there for us, then we're not getting the love that we deserve from those around us, and we shouldn't let that happen. We shouldn't stand idly by for ourselves. We need to stand up for ourselves when the situation arises, whether that is to literally advocate for ourselves or to get those around us to support us when we need it if they're not doing so naturally. If there's another commandment in this week's Parsha to pay our workers their wages on time. So if somebody worked for you in a certain day, you have to pay them on time. But if we're having the self-respect, if we are loving ourselves, then we shouldn't accept it when we aren't being paid on time. When we did work for somebody and completed it and they're not paying us in a timely fashion, we have to advocate for ourselves again and recognize that if we are commanded to pay others on time, then we're not excluded in that concept of making sure that we too get paid on time in a timely fashion. Another example, you shall judge your fellow with righteousness. So we need to defend ourselves definitely if we're not being treated properly And we also should judge ourselves fairly. Oftentimes we are so hard on ourselves, and we're not judging ourselves with that righteousness. We're being more harsh on ourselves than is called for. And so if we are learning to love ourselves and have this respect for ourselves that we would have for other people, we too need to judge ourselves fairly and righteously. So by believing in the inverse of you shall love your neighbor as yourself, as you shall love yourself as your neighbor, if you take that to heart, then the Torah is telling us exactly how to obtain self-respect, exactly how to have love for ourselves. So when it's not evident and it's not obvious, and we're the people who give to other people easily but don't know how to receive it, the Torah is telling us exactly with this list of commandments how to obtain that love for ourselves and how to both that self-love and the love of our neighbors, how to receive the love of our neighbors for ourselves. So I hope we can all learn that powerful lesson. I wish you all a wonderful week and a Shabbat Shalom, and I look forward to speaking with you next time.